All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here for this next uh, piece of our ongoing learning online about all the amazing things that are happening in the Jewish world and all the things that have happened in the Jewish world that don't get enough airtime or coverage. Um, Kohenet Shoshana Brown represents many of these things. They are a licensed social worker, a healer, an educator, and an organizer committed to liberation through love. They're currently the U.S. Director of Pedagogy and Training for the Diaspora Alliance and co-founder of the Black Jewish Liberation Collective, a longtime abolitionist and member of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. Shoshana also co-hosts Beyond the Pale on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York, which I was blessed with being on not so long ago. As a Black mixed race Jewish femme and expert in restorative justice, Shoshana brings a deeply embodied, spiritually rooted vision for dismantling anti Semitism and building solidarity across communities. And Shoshana is my friend, and I love Shoshana a lot. Uh, they're also a Kohenet, which we'll be talking about a little bit because there may be folks who don't know what that means. And that work, I think, and we'll get into this a little bit, also overlaps really heavily with kind of new and different approaches to what it means to even be considering anti-Semitism in this time. But let's start with Diaspora Alliance. Um, there is, everybody knows that the ADL exists. I would guess that everybody that's listening knows that the ADL is horrible. And fewer people know that the ADL has competition now in the Diaspora Alliance. That there is an organization, there are other organizations, but the organization I would say that is offering a clear path to how to fight anti-Semitism in real, sustainable, and effective ways is Diaspora Alliance. And you're a major leader in that org. So can you start out by just telling us like how do you define anti-Semitism and how does that help you understand how to combat it?
Oh my gosh. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me on tonight. I've been really looking forward to our conversation. I'm very interested in where the conversation goes. To begin, I'd like to thank you for that introduction and say that, yeah, we like to think of ourselves maybe as part of the constellation of organizations that are working to offer alternatives to the monopoly that the ADL has really become in the space of fighting anti-Semitism, talking about anti-Semitism, and generating information, important information that our movements need to be able to dismantle it. Um, I am the director of pedagogy and training, so I'm responsible for all of our education work there. And one of the first things that I did when I came on board as the first person with this position was really to sit down and conceptualize what is happening in the field. How are people understanding anti-Semitism? And why is it not being fully addressed in the way that I know is possible? What's missing? So at Diaspora Alliance, we define anti-Semitism as describing hostility, discrimination, and prejudice and violence towards Jews as Jews. And that anti Semitic rhetoric, behavior holds Jews collectively responsible for society's ills or perceived evils in the world, resulting in marginalization, persecution, and violence. We also say that nailing down a formal definition of anti Semitism can be challenging, given how anti Semitic ideas and images change over time and function differently in local and national contexts around the world. That is to say that one of the things is that Diaspora Alliance is an international organization, We work in many contexts. I was just telling you that I just returned from a trip to France to explore and support colleagues there who are doing similar work and doing the same work and expanding Diaspora Alliance's impact in that area. And one of the things that I want to point out in the definition is this perceived evils in the world. I think one of the things that makes Diaspora Alliance as an organization different from, say, the ADL or many other organizations that are talking about or thinking about anti-Semitism is that we're really focused on root causes. And so we're really looking at the way in which part of how we typically understand oppression in the United States through this framework of race, class, gender is missing an important aspect, which is Christian supremacy. And so when we talk about perceived evils in the world, the idea of good and evil, that binary of right and wrong, only one answer, things like that really come out of a Christian worldview. And we really look at the way that in our particular context, because we're always really focused on what is the context in which we're working in. And here in the United States, we are operating in a Christian supremacist society in the way that we conceptualize our life. Many of us are expecting to get off for Christmas, whether or not we celebrate. Many of us are expecting to have Sundays off. Many of us never plan to go to the bank on a Sunday, right? Because we know those things are closed. Many of us are comfortable and even don't blink twice when our politicians must put their hand on a Bible to swear into office, right? Those are some of the things that are really what we call hegemonic in society, meaning we just don't even consider that that is something that we should be paying attention to. That operates very similarly to white supremacy, right? Where the default is white in white supremacy, unless otherwise stated. So American means white American, unless you're African American or Black American or Indian American or Chinese American. The list goes on, right? That is the same for Christian supremacy. Unless otherwise stated, the norm expectation in the United States is going to be according to Christian ideas.
And so, how does that kind of color the way that you think Jews are perceived in America that leads to anti-Semitism?
Yeah. I think that this is, you asked how it shapes how we address it. And one of the things is that distinguishes us is that we not only talk about the interpersonal issue, but we go beyond sort of like this Jew hate frame,
Mhm.
right? Or like the hate crime framework. And we really look at what are the systems of oppression because we're really trying to get to the root cause of it. And we understand that if we address the core issue and systems of oppression, the supremacy systems that our society operates, not only can we actually address anti-Semitism, but we can address racism, sexism, classism. We can address many other issues altogether when we really have a complete understanding of how these things operate and not separate anti-Semitism as something distinct and different from any other kind of oppression that we can fight in isolation.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that reframing. I think that if I'm hearing you right, the idea is that it's not that anti-Semitism is a like particular and unique ill that is disconnected from everything else, but that it is one kind of facet of what happens when a society has uh, systematic and cultural norms that people don't reflect on or think about or consider how they impact people who don't fit those norms. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be really thoughtful, especially in this country where we often think about distinction between church and state, right? We have been fed this myth for so long that there is a separation between church and state. And we're seeing now in our current political landscape, those lines are becoming more obviously blurred. But in fact, they've always been blurred. They've actually never been distinct. And so it is incumbent upon us to recognize the ways in which that shows up as contributing to the oppression of marginalized communities like Jewish people.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big, like the most obvious examples to me of what you're talking about is just, the Heritage Foundation, period. And then the way that it has, through Project Esther, kind of manipulated the role of like Jews in American society based on the desires and needs of their Christian supremacist framework, rather than anything to do with what Jews want at all. And it's interesting because there was like some folks might not know about this, but the is it the big is any of the biggest teachers union? What is yeah, the biggest teachers union in the country recently had its membership um, vote to um, no longer partner with the ADL on anti-Semitism education, and then the like leadership just ignored it and said, no, we're going to keep doing it. Um, and there's this kind of valence there for me of the Project Esther and Heritage Foundation strategy that's being used even by the ADL itself to use accusations of anti-Semitism as a like way to silence dissent about almost anything in society. Could you talk a bit about how that is like rearing its head in various places, and how it fits into this framing that I think is really wonderful that you put forward about really combating different forms of hegemonic oppression as being necessary to fighting this one particular fight?
Yeah. I want to also I want to answer your question, and before I get there, I want to make a note that I realize there's one important thing that I want to make sure to say here, which is that um, what I am advocating for and what we're advocating for is not that anti-Semitism is exactly the same as any other form of oppression. It has its distinct differences, and it does operate in a unique way. But that is not separate and apart from a larger system of oppression.
Mhm.
And so that's important to uplift. And with regard to the NEA controversy and what happened at the National Educators Association, look, first of all, I have to just say that I am a child of a union labor organizing family. On both sides of my family, my parents and their families have been part of labor unions. And so that feels important to say that I am very pro labor. And I think that our labor uh, organizing is really critical in this country at this time. In the face of fascism, labor unions hold an opportunity for us to both help skill up the general population on how to actually practice democracy in real concrete ways that are tangibly and daily impactful in their lives, and sometimes feel like a more closer experience than voting in an election. And also that they represent a democracy and they are a possibility. It's no wonder why the Republican Party, the far right, largely across many Southern states. These are right to work states. These are anti-labor union spaces. These are spaces that do not want labor unions to exist. And I think that we need to take note of that and take note of anyone who is attempting to create fractures in labor movements without actually supporting our workers towards unionization and towards stronger labor parties. That said, what happened at the NEA is a really interesting case. First, I want to make a caveat that the NEA is not explicitly partnering with the ADL. There is a very small portion of their work where they do reference and point people in the direction of the ADL. But at large, there's not necessarily a huge contract where they're operating collectively. What this was, I think, was a signal from teachers across the United States saying that they are raising the flag on the ADL and on the way in which anti-Semitism is first of all not taught in schools, and if it is taught, is not is supported by the ADL, which has a really serious history of undermining movements for justice, documented, and including supporting the CIA and spying on the Black Power movement and other movements for justice, wherein they really actively disrupted and foiled our movements for justice in the history of this country. And furthermore, are actively promoting the support of the state of Israel right now, which is, having an active genocide, and there's a starvation happening. And so to continue to do that without actually, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, to be excusing behavior like Elon Musk's doing Sig Heil, right? And aligning yourself with fascist ideologies is something that the teachers are saying we don't want in our schools. This is not how we want to be talking about anti-Semitism, and also the way that anti-Semitism is talked about by the ADL is at what they have told me directly. Their concern is actually that the way in which the ADL addresses anti-Semitism promotes and supports anti-Palestinian racism and anti-Arab racism. And that's actually the problem, right? And so I want to say, like, in contradiction, there are many organizations, not only Diaspora Alliance, that are thinking deeply about how we can actually not do that, right? Like I said, you cannot fight anti-Semitism in isolation. We can't be like, oh, let's fight anti-Semitism, but whatever for everybody else. Y'all are on your own. It doesn't work. Discrimination doesn't work like that. Oppression doesn't work like that. So the concern there is, like, the teachers voted, and what I started off saying is that this is democracy, right? Teachers unions, unions in general, are spaces where we get to practice democracy. And so when we do that and we have teachers that vote for one thing and then the leadership says something else, I think it's a microcosm for our larger society. And what we're seeing across the country, municipalities that are taking a stand, that are having a certain kind of politic, that are putting forth policies that are in an effort for liberation, that are creating sanctuary cities for immigrants, that are putting more money and effort into alternatives to incarceration and general civic and civil society, such that the police are less needed and we're seeing crime go down. And yet we're seeing the leadership, right,
Hmm.
of this country, the federal government, actually doing the reverse. So what we
Yeah.
saw at the NEA is really just a microcosm for what we're seeing in our larger society. And that feels very confrontation. Like I feel confronted by that. I feel terrified by that. And I feel like, whoa, I don't know what to do about that, right? Like we aren't what's happening is that we're practicing democracy and there's something else that's actually undermining our democracy right now.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I mean, I think one of the core issues that you raised that is also kind of conjunct with the democratic crisis we're having countrywide is the genocide in Israel, and is the way that uh, accusations of anti-Semitism in America, or fears of anti-Semitism, even amongst, like, not even by power structures but by like individuals who believe that the way for them to be safe from anti-Semitism is for there to be a Jewish supremacist state that they can flee to should anti-Semitism arise, leads to a lot of like confusion around how to actually make Jews safe, like what that even means, whether what if anyone actually can be truly safe, right? But I think that that is where this crux um, of anti-democratic, um, well, I don't even know what the word is right now, just this like wave of anti-democracy around the world, um, hits the road with anti-Semitism and like the ideas of how to fight it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on like how we can, or how you have even how you are working to disentwine that idea of anti-Semitism best being fought through a Jewish supremacist Zionist state being supported at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say firstly that this is a big project.
Yeah.
We didn't get here overnight. We didn't get here in the last 2 years. Like this didn't just happen. This didn't just happen in the last half a century. This didn't just occur in the last 70 years, right? This has been a really, really long project. The Zionist project has a really, really long, deep and entangled history, both being supported by anti-Semites, like originally, Lord Balfour in England, not wanting Jews in his backyard, right? Like not wanting Jews in England and being like, you know what, let's send them somewhere else, right? And including many Jews in the in Russia and in the Soviet Union who saw the development of nation states, the transformation from empires to nation states, and said, let's get us a country because it sucks here and everybody else is creating a country, right? And so in that sense was part of some kind of resistance idea, right? So I want to hold that there's all of this history, and then there's the reality of what's happening on the ground that we actually have to reckon with. And we can't avoid the history. We can't avoid the current reality of people starving, of mass death, by really redirecting our attention to discursive philosophical arguments about what it was meant to be or what it was meant to do. We have to deal with the current reality. And I think that this idea, I want to say something about this idea that you bring up of Jewish safety in general. And as a social worker, I've thought a lot about this, running groups, doing youth work, practicing restorative justice with young people, and thinking about like, how do we talk about safe space, right? Like everybody wants safety. But there's some lessons and wisdoms to be learned from people in those social work spaces that have said that actually we don't, safe space is non-existent, right? Like safe, there really isn't a safe space, and that what actually there is brave space. And redirecting our idea and reframing what we're looking for and what kind of space we can actually create. And I think that there's wisdom for us as Jewish people to learn from that, and as all people. The world is violent. And safety is not something that can be guaranteed anywhere by anyone, period. We are living in a world where many, many nation states have nuclear weapons. Like, we are living in a world where AR-15s are accessible at Walmart. You know what I mean? Like, this is a world that we're living in that is not safe, and we have to acknowledge that there it actually isn't. But what does create safety is actually leaning into what we fear most and recognizing that it's actually not something to be feared. And so, what I mean by that is, how can we be better neighbors? How can we be better humans? Those are the things that I have seen in my life actually create safety for people. When things happen in a local context in your neighborhood, the people that come to your rescue are your neighbors, right? There, it's the those are the people that we should rely on first, and foremost. When the COVID lockdown happened, so many stories, including my own, were like going and slipping your number under your neighbor's door and knocking and saying, "Do you need something? I live in a building with many elders, right? Do you need me to go to the grocery store for you? Do you need something, etc." Right? So that is actually how we create safety, by knowing each other. And so I think that this idea of Zionism, or support for Israel, being bound in sort of Jewish safety really comes out of a long history of, and the last thing I'll say is, like, that history, maybe you've talked in other interviews about it, but that history is I like to think of it as contrasted with a different type of Jewish history that I think we don't talk about enough. We talk a lot about the Zionist history within the Jewish community, but we don't talk enough about the Bundist history in the Jewish community, where people said, no, I'm going to fight to be here, right now, with my comrades, with the people that and build cross-class solidarity and be in labor unions and
Mhm.
support a workers' world, right? A world where all workers can own the means of production and be empowered to have control over our lives. That's a different version of Jewish history that I think should be equally uplifted.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that one of the big parts of the project here that we're working on with the ACJ um, is lifting up all of these different histories that have been erased and neglected because of the totalitarian nature of all nationalism, and Jewish nationalism has the same issue, where it has to swallow everything in order to maintain its mode of control. And so, yeah, thank you for bringing that piece up as well. And that also, the Bundists were leftists, right? Like that was the point.
Yes.
And we're seeing today very clearly that the both the state of Israel itself, and I'd argue most of the kind of Zionist institutional world in America, whether Jewish or not, right, is allied with the far right, like the opposite end of the political spectrum. And so, how are you seeing that unfold with regard to anti-Semitism, and what does it mean for American Jewry, who have, like Bundism was present in America, but mostly in Eastern Europe. But even after the kind of Bundist project started melting away in America, Jews had an enormous history of leftism in this country. And even today, although most Jews probably aren't like, wouldn't call themselves leftists, we are certainly not known for being right wing in this country. So how do you think about those threads fraying, and how does anti-Semitism play into how the right, both in Israel and here, are kind of aligning with each other?
Yeah, oh my gosh, these are such good questions. I would say first that the Jewish community is not monolithic. You're certainly right that there is I would also say, according to the statistics that we have access to, that the majority of Jews in the United States are maybe voting more Democrat than Republican. And I think it's interesting to also consider once again this kind of microcosm where you have a large a base of people that are saying one thing, and then you have a smaller group of leadership that are actually doing something else. They are not listening to the people that they are meant to represent. So it's clear again that like this idea of democracy is not actually happening in the spaces that we want them to happen in.
Yeah,
um and I, I think that there's so much to be said about that, right? We can look at it through a few different lenses. We can look at it through the lens of capitalism, of like what is actually, to run an institution, you have to have money. We're not talking about just like groups of people. We're talking about thousands of buildings, thousands and thousands of staffing, right? Like when we talk about the Jewish institutional community, that is not, it's structural, right? These are physical buildings, these are staff, employees, people that make their entire living, their entire life in these spaces, advocating for certain things, teaching, creating community, creating space, prayerful spaces, etc. To do that in this society, in the American context explicitly, we need capital, right? Those institutions need money. And so this is also like just to say about what is going to put that money and the ability to continue running that institution at risk. And choices are made based on that,
yeah.
in big and small ways every single day. Including, I just saw an article saying that a social worker at a hospital in New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, was fired because of a sign that was on her desk that said, "Let Gaza live," right? Like from the smallest thing to some of the larger things, like many institutional leaders in the Jewish institutional community aligning with and supporting the Trump administration, right? For many reasons. I also want to bring in another reason, which is access to power. Like
Mhm.
how do they consider being able to do anything in this country, push forward policy, um, think about how to support smaller rural Jewish communities, etc., if they are embattled with what we're seeing turning out to be one of the most authoritarian presidents, right? A president that as actively has a city under siege right now. We're going into Washington, D.C. and not and deploying the military without due cause, right? From a public perspective. So positioning yourself against a ruler, I'm not gonna say leader, but a ruler like that, you're not going to win policy. You're not going to win access for your community. You're not going to win a seat at the table. You're actually going to lose those things, right? So there's something to be said about that. Another way to frame it and look up at it is about, and this goes back to sort of this Zionist Bundist distinction and ideology, this right, left, and don't love all of the binaries in this conversation, but for the sake of time, right? There also is a competition and different ideology within the Jewish community and within many communities around assimilation, right? Like, how much are we willing to assimilate? How much are we willing to actually hide who we are? To sacrifice our values, to sacrifice our rituals and our practices for the sake of power, for the sake of access. So those are some of the ways that I am able to see what's happening with larger Jewish institutions and digest how they are coming to make the decisions that they're coming to make.
Yeah, and I think that analysis was like spot on, and I think it gets missed a lot when folks like you and me are in conversation with how we build a Judaism that is actually reflective of our values and that we want to see in this world. It so often comes that we talk about personalities rather than systems and capital. And I think you're 100% dead on that that is actually like what's more at play than simply like
Jonathan Greenblatt's ego here.
yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Um, but the last piece you said, I think is really important, and I want to use it to kind of transition into talking more about your Kohenet work, because that work isn't just about um, like non-assimilation. It's also about rediscovering and reinventing new ways to uniquely and like rootedly do Judaism. And a lot of people don't like there may be people on this very call, even though there is another Kohenet on this call, at least one. Um, might not even know what a Kohenet is, what that means, where it's from. Could you do like just like a quick like what is it? And then talk a little bit about how it overlaps with a lot of the internal work that you've spoken about already and is implicit to what it means to really dismantle anti-Semitism.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this question. So Cohenet is a clerical role for femme folks, femme presenting and non-binary people in the Jewish tradition that is about reclaiming our rightful role as clergy and as ritualists and reclaiming our practices, particularly looking at earth-based Jewish practices. So it's a beautiful community of folks that are weaving together various or various practices and rituals to really shift and reclaim the way in which Jewish practice was always an embodied practice and a religion connected to the earth. And many people, in fact, I grew up not even really recognizing that, not recognizing that Sukkot is a harvest festival,
Mhm.
that, like that Pesach is a planting festival, like that we have these festivals of like the tree birthday and
Mhm.
all of these events like the Hanukkah during the darkest time of the year where we open up to the light. Um, where we process so much in connection to the earth and the planet. And it is really a confrontation to the way in which Jewish practice has become in our modern age really influenced by a patriarchal disembodiment. It's become very philosophical, very heady, and very stiff. And this is in line with many. Cohennet is one of many communities that is opening up to how can we re-embody our practice of Judaism. And it's in direct confrontation to what I talked about in terms of one of the frames for looking at how Jewish institutions are making their decisions, which is it is anti-assimilationist, right? It is really a reclamation of a proud Judaism. And I think that that is an important part of fighting anti-Semitism, is to really deal with all of the trauma, intergenerational trauma, all of the communal trauma that exists, that came from the pogroms, the Holocaust, and even modern day anti-Semitic experiences, to really heal from that, face that, such that it doesn't make us small and make us try and hide and go away, but rather we can create some space that where there is a freedom from this fear. And we can be free to fully express ourselves and our Judaism. And so that's kind of how those things go together for me. Being a Kohenet and my work at Diaspora Alliance is actually like, how can we create a world in which people are not scared to be Jewish, because we are actually neighbors with our friends, right? We're actually neighbors with our Muslim friends and people who are in the street with, right? Neighbors with our Christian friends and everybody, Buddhist and all together, like Hindu, etc. The list goes on. How can we create space for us to not hide,
Mhm.
to not allow that fear that we have of anti-Semitism and annihilation to completely control literally every decision that we make, consciously or unconsciously? Um, I have a friend that shared with me once, she, in a conversation similar to this one, where I was talking about the fear that we carry, she had a revelation that she's never traveled internationally, but for some reason, every single one of her kids has a passport just in
Mhm.
case. Right? These are the small things that many of us in our Jewish community are doing on a daily basis, conscious or unconscious decisions that we're making about how we show up, about whether we wear a kippah or not. When we get to synagogue, you'll put on the kippah, but as soon as you step out of the building, you'll take it off. What is the decision there? And how can we create a world and spaces and communities where maybe you have alternatives to these decisions? Maybe you think differently about how you show up, about how you walk through the world. What will it take for you all to release that fear? And for me, it is about a reclamation of our Jewish practices. It's also a reclamation, beyond the fear of our Jewish religion from the chokehold of Zionist ideology. So many people I know have trouble finding synagogues, services, prayerful spaces to be in, because they are not interested in saying a prayer for the state of Israel, for example, or even for that matter, saying a prayer for the United States, right? For the United States government, right? Like, people are not interested in government in their prayers and rituals. So going back to that, what we started out earlier in the conversation, there's this myth that there's a separation between church and state, but
Mhm.
somehow we're praying for the state of Israel. Somehow we're praying for the United States government. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure. We're separate, right? Like, doesn't make sense to me. Like, how can you say two things out of different sides of your mouth, right? So it's really like, how then do we engage with some of our prayers that do talk about um Yisrael, right? Lashana haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, right?
Mhm.
How do we think about all of the prayers that we do have that are referencing Yerushalayim, that are referencing Yisrael, that are referencing Zion? How do we think about that? And how can we reorient ourselves? Because I think that there has been a co-optation that all of those prayers are meant to mean actually the state of Israel rather than a connection to the land, not the government, or a connection to an idea, Lashana Haba Yerushalayim, like what is the world that we're creating, Yerushalayim as a placeholder for the world, the better world that we're creating together, not necessarily the city of Jerusalem, right? So there are many orientations that we can have, and I think Cohennet, amongst many new and emerging Jewish communal prayer spaces, are in this dialogue, are in the space of let us reconfigure, let us rethink how we orient to this. And at least in the Cohennet circles that I participate in, that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been something that's been very inspiring to me too about Kohenet from the get-go is that the bravery of experimenting beyond the bounds of norms is what is actually needed in every culture and every religion, not just Judaism. And you all have been doing that really beautifully for a long time now, and it's gone. Unfortunately unrecognized by far too many people.
And I want to say that Kohenet, just like the Jewish community, just like everyone that we're talking about, it's not a monolith.
Sure.
Kohenet is as a large body is not professing any kind of anti-Zionism, non-Zionism, or anything like that. There are various circles within the Kohenet community that have different political orientations. So I just want to make that clear as well.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah. um, so I mean, we've talked about a whole bunch of different things, all of which are uh, circling around, the scary realities that we're living in of a shutting down of democracy, um, of institutions failing to actually represent and stand up for their constituencies, particularly in the Jewish world, of the ways in which orgs that are supposed to be fighting anti-Semitism are platforming anti-Semites and seeking to like cozy up with them as a way, as means to power. Um, I have two questions, and then I want to let other people ask questions, and you can pick whichever one you want. And if you want to do both, great. But one is um, in in the future that I believe in, when there is a reckoning for what has been happening over the past at least 2 years, but I would say 10, with the ways that our institutions have been cozying up to right-wing power against the interests of most Jews that belong to these institutions. Um, how do you see that playing out in such a way that the people that have been harmed have a can be restored in some way, and the people who have done the harm can make up for the harm they've done? That's one option. And the other option, which is, how are you staying hopeful and grounded in this work when it really does feel, I'm sure, like a constant upward battle?
Yeah. Wow, really good questions. I think that I do not have any hope for any kind of truth and reconciliation process within the Jewish community around um, Zionism and an allegiance of our institutional our Jewish institutions to right-wing anti-Semitic agendas. Um, I do have hope that as we move into a world that is possible, where everybody is safe and right, we talked about safe, but everybody is able, not safe, but able to be their full self, that is able to express themselves and able to have community and have all their needs met. That's the world that I'm going for. And I do believe that in that world, um, those who are the most scared right now, those who are digging their heels into these institutions that are not listening to the masses of who they say they represent, who are not doing due diligence to be democratic, that those people who are carrying the most fear actually find healing and actually realize that it's okay over here, that there's community over here, they're loved over here, they're wanted and needed over here. It's a party over here. That's the world that I'm going for, and that's my hope. Not that there will be any kind of formal reconciliation process, but rather that those of us who are maybe the most scared and digging their heels in can find community in ways that they never thought would be possible. And I know that that is possible because I have myself midwifed that into being for people, for some people on individual levels. And I've seen people experience that within the last 2 years, to make a turn and realize that a community that they thought they would never fit into, they could never feel safe in, they could never feel wholly themselves. They have found community, they have found friendship, they have found love, they have found beauty, they have found joy. So I think that that's possible. And in some ways, that's what keeps me hopeful and grounded. Um, that I continue to see small sparks of people going out on a limb, taking a chance, and trying, just trying to lean into a more just world and realizing that it's safe over here. Like it's cool. We're good over here, and it's possible for you to be here and not be terrified. Um, and so those small moments are really what keeps me hopeful. And in terms of groundedness, I really enjoy being literally with the earth, literally in the
Mm.
ground. So growing food, taking hikes, being with nature, you know, and in this moment, I want to lift up the work of Kirva, and also the work of Yoshi Silverstein and Jules Paschal, like folks that are doing this sort of anti-racist embodied practice, this body positive, um, liberation-oriented Jewish practices, I think are spaces where I go to feel regrounded, and spaces that have taught me um, little gems of how I can continue to reconnect to the earth in really meaningful and embodied ways that are Jewishly oriented.
Beautiful. Thank you. Can you hear it, son? May it be God's will that we have this world for everyone. We do have one person who wants to ask a question. Roberta, if you'd like to unmute, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to show my face if that is more
It's up to you.
alive for Shoshana and you. I can imagine it might be.
Hey,
It's
Roberta.
really up to you.
Sure.
Okay.
What's
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
question?
Yeah.
Um, Oops, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I came a little late. Um, I'm just something you said, Shoshana, and thank you so much for this conversation and for all the work and commitment that all of us have to shift our people from Jewish supremacy. For me, I hear when I'm listening closely to people, to people's fears, uh, I'm hearing, wow, you believe that the only way we can be safe is by with supremacy, which is exactly what Jabotinsky and the founders, right, of the State of Israel said. Anyway, my question. So I'm just happy to find more communities alternative that are presenting alternatives. So I felt real curious. I'm quite familiar with the Cohennets. I live near Jill and Shoshana. I know so many friends who are Cohennets, and I have a little regret that I wasn't one in time. Uh, but you shared, Shoshana, that uh, kind of reclaiming the form of Jewish practice that Kohenet and other communities are offering. Um, I forget what you said, but you said that's a big part of how you're approaching all of this. And I'm kind of having a real challenge with that. Um, the last time I went to my synagogue, I actually had to leave. I've just felt so uncomfortable with the raising of this energy because I didn't know what is the energy that's being raised. You know, is it this racist, xenophobic, supremacist? I mean, what is it? Um, so I guess I'd love to hear more how um I'd like to be inspired. And also I publish about Torah every week and I vacillate between feeling uh out of integrity and no, it's really there. So I guess I just like to hear more about how you can be in integrity with what Judaism stands for in the world today. Of course, it's not our choosing, but you know, how you feel in integrity with what you've been sharing about what Judaism is doing in the world today and kind of, you know, uplifting it.
Yeah.
And I'm asking because I used to live at Ala Chaim. I mean, I am like Reb Zalman is my Rebbe. I'm like all the way, yeah, when I found that. And now I am really in crisis about it. So it's not a challenge to you. It's really for my own, maybe I could find some more inspiration.
Yeah. You know, I hear that. I hear you completely. And, you are not alone. Like this is not you are not the only person, right? It is why I think there is so I see especially during high holidays, for example, just so many of these like mini minions happening in people's homes because people are not wanting to consume what is being offered in some of the larger synagogues that are aligned with the mainstream Jewish institutions. And I think that it is so important that people who believe that a different type of world is possible, people who believe that we actually can be in the world as full human beings and that there is a world that can be created where everyone on this planet has human rights and dignity and has what they need and has housing and has food. Um, those of us who are Jewish who believe in that have a duty to be visibly Jewish. Why? Because the alternative doesn't get to keep my Judaism.
Mm,
Like the people who I disagree with politically do not get to claim and own what it means when I say that I'm Jewish. And so the more of us that
mm,
can be clear about being Jewish and visibly Jewish in the world, the more we can contest for the power that they are monopolizing. They don't get to have my relationship with spirit, my relationship with Shekhinah, my relationship with Hashem. They don't get to have that. I
mm,
won't allow it.
mm,
And we have a duty, right? Because for the sake of Hashem, we have a duty to claim our relationship there, and to not allow anyone to get in the way of that. And so we have to get creative because we don't have the resources. We don't have the capital, right? There's a reason why, because war machines are very lucrative. And we're not interested in war. And so we don't have the buildings and the staff and all of the things, right? And we still have our relationship with Hashem, and that is number one. And I think that that is clear and important that we uplift that, and continue to root in that and continue to find community to be together in ways that feel nourishing and good. And I'll say that it's hard work. Like I've never worked this hard at being Jewish in my life. you know, because for me to find the kind of minions that I want to attend for high holidays means that I have to co-lead them. That's
Right.
uninterested. It's fun. I love doing it. I love my collaboration with Rav Koach. I collaborated last year with Rav Koach Frazier, and Shekhinah willing, will do so again this year. And also, it calls for a new type of leadership. And sometimes what that means is you are the leader. Like you are the person. And if not you, then who, right? Like it is incumbent upon all of us to find our role, to find our gift, to find our skill, to like actually stand up in this moment together and really create that world that we're hoping to exist.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much, Shoshana. I can't imagine ending on a better note. You really mic dropped. Thank you. That is that what you spoke to is, I think, is my experience. Other people in the chat are saying it's their experience too. Right now is a time of new leadership, of creativity, and of bravery, as you said. It's not about safety, it's about bravery, and bravery together is what will make us safe. So thank you so, so much for your time tonight. I put um, uh, for those who are on the Zoom itself, I put Shoshana's website in the chat. It is rootedpathways.llc if folks who aren't on the Zoom want to connect. And next month in the hot seat will be Rabbi Tirza Firestone.
Oh,
And we're going to be talking about her work with what it means to deal with the traumas of the Jewish past, especially in this time of Israel's genocide. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Shosh. Bye.
thank you.